Hello and welcome back to the Faith and Culture Show. I'm Catherine Camp, your hostess for the show. And this is where we dig into those different kind of topics, and sometimes they're difficult topics. But we do this in order to educate ourselves so that we can have better conversations with the people around us. Conversations that count, not just surface, and conversations with an eternal perspective. Today, I'm just very blessed to have GR back. And we are going to talk about the topic of how we celebrate Christmas and why. It's not really what you expect. So let's get him on and get this started. Hello, GR. Thank you for being here again.
Thank you for having me back.
Yes, sir. Well, last time we met, you talked about Thanksgiving and the historicity of it. It's not really what we're being told as far as the Plymouth and just, meeting together with the Native Americans that were already here. There was something deeper. And you did bring up some of the nuances about Christmas and how we celebrate Christmas here in the U.S. or maybe in the Western Hemisphere. I don't know. You can probably really fill us in on how did we start with the Christmas celebration at this time of year, when we pretty much as Christians know that it really Jesus wasn't born at this time of year. He was born probably at a different time of year, earlier in the year. So,
yes, yeah. And actually, I've never ran down academically in my head, so I would know when that time of year was. I have heard arguments that it was in the springtime, and I've heard arguments that it was in the fall, but there's nothing to support at all a winter time because of where the sheep were at the time, because apparently the sheep were in the hills. Some of the settings were culturally just completely disaligned with the weather or the time of season. So anyway, like I said, I've never really dove into the academics of when it is, but the reality is, and this goes back to our history with Britain, and if you ever heard of a gentleman by the name of, I think, Cromwell, I think is what his name was. He was the leader behind, I believe, what they called this thing called a Puritan or purifying of the Christianity of England. Now, if I remember correctly, and this really goes down to this concept, this was happening in like 1620, where Cromwell basically wanted to get pagan rituals out of England. And so he went down this path of basically banning all of this and creating an oppression towards what was happening. Was this an affinity and or a redirection of religious freedom? And so they had this period of Puritan, I just call it tyranny, where they ultimately got the Dutch to assist in a revolt, which was basically the Glorious Revolution. Now, the Glorious Revolution really drove home this concept of religious freedom. And one would think, well, why would a nation want to have religious freedom when they already had a monarchical theocracy? I mean, this goes back to how King Henry, on an edict of his own, because his desire was to get divorced, really created this huge religious schism within the British Empire, or what was going to become the empire. So, nevertheless, this created I'll just say a petri dish of all of these different conflicts of religion. And so when we came and started migrating to the United States, most people know that there were certain states that were created because of religious oppression. Pennsylvania was one of those, Maryland, I believe. Well, we all know Massachusetts and so forth. So it was a part of this history of this this migration of people leaving Britain because of religious tyranny. This religious tyranny was epitomized in this glorious revolution. So when the glorious revolution finally won and they unseated this puritanistic paradigm out of this monarchy, then what ended up happening was they created the Glorious Bill of Rights. And the Glorious Bill of Rights kind of implanted this ability of religious freedom. And what came with that were these pagan, how do you say this? This pagan injection that started accompanying some of these holidays. Now, in America, and even in Britain, the winter solstice was a pagan holiday, period. And as a matter of fact, Congress was in session in its first December 25th and the 24th. They were in session working. They didn't recognize this time of year as a holy event. As a matter of fact, going back to our last conversation, the holiday, or I should say the Thanksgiving, was the first sacred recognition as a day off or a day of recognition as a nation was Thanksgiving. Recognizing the divine hand in establishing this nation and recognizing the fact that he gave us that Constitution. That was truly our national spiritual holiday. And so as the winter wilding is what they called it, started growing more and more, or the celebration of this paganistic holiday of the winter solstice, it started taking root in America. And as a matter of fact, it became very popular in the southern states and in the northern states like New York. So New York really was starting to get, I'll just say, beaten up every winter solstice because the classes of people, well, let's just take a quick aside if I give this latitude. America had classes. Every nation had classes. There were the elitists, and then there were the poor. There were people that, were dependent. They were either indentured servants or they just struggled. And in the wintertime, it was a real struggle. This was also a time when, if we really look at the society and how life was, infant mortality rate was so high that they didn't name their children for the first couple of years. They called them the visitor. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Sorry. Was that here, you say, in the United States or in America, that they didn't?
Yeah, so in the United States, as a matter of fact, in John Adams' biography, they talk in their letters, emails. in John and Abigail's letters back and forth, they talked about the visitor, the child that they had just before he'd left to go on some work for the Republic. And so it was, when you look at it historically, the common problem was infant mortality rate. And what they did to kind of combat that was they had lots of kids, because they didn't know, as soon as they had a kid, they had another kid, because they didn't know if that one was going to survive. So they had another one, then they had another one. And, it was just a brutal life that we lived. We didn't have, EMTs with an ambulance, and it was blood leaching and that type of stuff that they did for healthcare. So, our society was very different, and the paradigms were a lot different. And so people, helped each other, but the compassion really came from the churches. Compassionate services, welfare, those types of things literally came from the churches. So as we evolved after the Declaration of Independence, after the Constitution, we just the states started going down their merry way. New York was thriving. It was bringing a lot of commerce in. And so as it was bringing in commerce, and let me just add this to help complicate things. In 1790 was the first communist revolution in France. This is where the French from the communes basically revolted, and they tried to get rid of the monarchies and the dictator. They wanted to create a government of the people coming from the communes. But what ended up happening was a guy by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte, a demagogue, rose up with his demagoguery, obtained power. And what ended up happening was we see how the first revolution being left on its own, there was no guiding leader to take it, so they failed. Well, the concepts of collectivism started permeating into the United States. As a matter of fact, in the early 1800s, collective labor started becoming a very common thing. Trying to create collective labor, unions. Unions were actually active in the United States by the 1820s. So this type of uprising, because what this was doing was it was trying to empower the poor to create a bargaining chip for their labor and so forth. There were so many different things that were affecting the mores of our society in the early 1800s. This is just one of those few things. As you know, the next, the Great Awakening was just coming around the corner as well. In the 1820s was the Great Awakening, the second Great Awakening in America. So there were all sorts of things that were kind of piling into this pot. And what ended up happening is, as we look at these winter wildings, they started getting so bad that by 1828, the City Council of New York suffered so badly from the damage and the threats of these poor people harassing, haranguing, and attacking those who had money. They basically instituted the New York City Police Department. So it got that bad. Now, as they kind of move forward into this, one of the things that actually started happening was this gentleman that started writing these articles called, let me see here, it was stories about the English Esquire who basically invited peasants. The guy's name was Washington Irving. Oh, yeah, it was Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, who was this English gent who during the winter, was reaching out and bringing the poor, feeding them and giving them, things and gifts, those types of things. And this was the beginning of creating a narrative of Christianity in the wintertime, and started creating this noble gentleman that was doing these things. And so most people kind of understand them as the old, I'll just say the British history of what they started celebrating Christmas. The fact of the matter is, actually, Washington Irving admitted that he made these things all up, that they weren't based on any truth. They were all fictional. But the reason he was doing these was to help, I'll guess the best way to say this is to help kind of create a new paradigm for people to get along instead of infighting and, taking property, damaging property, those types of things. So this kind of became this noble conspiracy. That's a good way of putting it, where what they wanted to do was kind of help quell the angst, the anxiety of the poor, that, they were starving, they were barely making it through the wintertime and so forth. These people who were struggling, to kind of quell them and to try to create a giving of everybody so that everybody kind of gave. You want to say something?
Okay, we're coming back from some technical difficulties, but we're going to pick up where we left off. So, GR, we were talking a little bit about the winter wildings, and that it was Washington Irving who wrote about, correct me if I'm wrong, who wrote about wealthy giving to the poor so that they wouldn't cause such mayhem. It just reminds me of what's going on today. But these people that are causing the problems really aren't the poor people. They're just being funded in order to tear our country apart.
Correct.
So what I want to find out here is, how did this disparity of income come about? Because we know that when we came over to begin with, the people who came over came over to start businesses, well, really to get away from what was going on. But they started businesses, so they had to, hire people to help them. So how did this big disparity even happen?
Well, so actually, the evolution from, let's just say, this organized Stone Age nation going into what we would call the industrial era, because industries started coming to America. If you read Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, this is the Bible, the Bible on the free world economy, or this concept of an open and free economy. And so he talks about how factories and how they differentiate, how they innovate, and how, they can get advantages over others and become very powerful. As a matter of fact, if you didn't know what was happening in Europe, are you familiar with the song, the Jerusalem Song? So the Jerusalem Song is a song that is their second national anthem. It goes all the way back. It's an informal national anthem. If you hear it, you go, "Oh yes, I know that song."
For who? Who is it the national anthem for?
Well, the song is called Jerusalem.
Okay.
And if you want, I can pull it up and play you a unique orchestration, because there's a band that actually did this back in the 70s. And so if you just give me a second, I can play it for you. But this song spoke very heavily about this new spirit, and that Britain was literally foreordained to basically prepare the world for the second coming, that they would, be instrumental. And when you listen to this, it is one of those things that go, huh? And let me just play it for you. Here it is right here. This is it.
Go ahead. Here. There you go. It's hard to hear it, GR.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this was like the second anthem for Great Britain?
Yes, it was an informal anthem for Great Britain. And as a matter of fact, this is what it says. These are the lyrics to it, so it's probably hard for you to hear. I get it.
Okay.
And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green? And was the holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures seen? Because there is this story that Christ, before he set up his ministry, before he went out, he traveled the world and he went to England. And did the continents divine shine forth upon our clouded hills? And was Jerusalem builded here among these dark satanic mills? They're talking about the mills of factories that have been created that are basically enslaving people, people making a living. They're maybe improving their life, but they're becoming slaves to the industries that are starting to pollute and those types of things in the early 1800s. And so it goes on and says, "Bring me my bow of burning gold, bring me my arrows of desire, bring me my spear, O clouds unfold, bring me my chariot of fire. I will not cease from mental fight, nor shall my sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem in England's green, pleasant land." Now, that's the first four stanzas of this anthem that they created. And getting back to my microphone, because I kind of buried everything. And you didn't know that because technology didn't disclose that. But anyway, so this happened in early 1800s. This concept of England having this role in preparing the world for coming for Christ. As a matter of fact, the whole fact that they created Israel was a part of that role that they had. And so this song kind of alludes to this divine nature of Britain. And technically, it was Britain that brought in this marriage between the pagan winter wildlings and this marriage of Christianity.
Okay, so when you say they created Israel, you mean in 1948?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So,
yes.
Okay. And the winter
Actually,
wildlings.
It was before that. They started putting everything in place to basically prepare everything for creating Israel as a nation. Correct.
Okay. All right. So now we're getting to the point where the winter wildlings. Now that was happening, right? That wasn't just a story. Was that really happening?
So in America, we didn't have this religious twisting that they were trying to do in England. And as a matter of fact, in England, it was a religious expression that was, I'll just say, as I'm reading this, the sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, he was this English gentleman, and a series of stories about how he celebrated what they called Christmas in England. Remember, these are all fabricated.
Okay.
There's no truth here. and so,
this was the early 1800s.
Early 1800s, and he was living in the United States. This Washington Irving, correct.
Okay.
And so he created this sketchbook. This actually, as this started going out, it started awakening the good in people to, instead of, committing crimes, try to be a little more compassionate, because these rich people are people too. Just like the poor are people. So it started creating this awakening that literally put what I would say America on this track of fusing Christianity and the birth of Christ to this pagan holiday. And it really happened in America, and then it went to the world in commercial perspectives. In other words, everything. Okay. Go ahead.
I always thought that this whole thing started, or I don't know why, that it all started in Europe, because you go over there for Christmas, or you see how they celebrate Christmas, and you feel, because they are older than we are as a nation, that that came over here, that there was already that tradition of candles and Christmas trees and all of that.
So let me cut to a chase. Going down these different veins of how do you prove something, right? Because it is cultural to infuse song to a holiday or to something spiritual, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So go look at where we find songs that celebrate the birth of Christ. And you're going to find that almost all the Christmas carols that we sing today really originated from the United States in the mid 1800s, the late 1800s. That's when they started.
Okay.
And so what you're talking about is there were cultures that were not English. Remember, America was a bunch of different migrations from England or from Britain. One of the later migrations were the Irish. And they got overrun, the potato famine. I mean, people kind of understand these major migrations. There were other people coming to America, but I'm going to venture to say, I'm probably not going out on a limb to say it was at a minimum 80%. Everybody living in America came from Britain. As far as the landholders, and even the black freemen came from Britain, most of them. The blacks that we had here, because blacks were free in Britain.
Yeah.
We didn't have blacks established into slavery until about the mid 1600s, where there was actually black indentured servants that came to America, got their own plantation and started, living the American dream until the king. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What about the Spanish?
So the Spanish were to the south of us, and the Spanish, nobody likes to bring them up, but I really appreciate you doing that, because if the Spanish would have taken over North America, I mean, they had a presence in Florida because it was just a great place to be, right?
Yeah.
However,
Still is.
However, there was nothing in America, gold, treasure to steal. They weren't going to invest any, troops or anything else. You got to remember, the Spanish just lost the Armada as we started migrating to America. The British floodgates opened when we defeated their Armada. Now we could freely come to the new America. And so they stayed south, and look at how they treated the poor indigenous people in Mexico. They raped their women, and they created a new class or a new society of people, the Mexican, which is basically a Spanish Indian mix. And so, I mean, they did that deliberately to basically create a forced harmony. It's hard for the parents to raise their hands and try to kill their children because they're half blood of their conquerors, if that makes sense. And so there's a word for it, and it eludes me because it's just this really weird word, where this has been done throughout society, where even if you saw Braveheart, did you ever see Braveheart, the movie?
I think I saw parts of it. I can't say I remember a lot of it, so I'm going to say whatever.
At the very beginning of Braveheart, the Mel Gibson, who's this guy who just gets married, there's a law that the whoever the royalty is has free access to basically engage with sex with the new wife, to take her virginity and basically impregnate her. And the first child in that family is a mix between the Scots and England. And so it's a very brutal custom of, occupying force and so forth. And it created more animosity, where the Mexicans just did it. I mean, they just did it to mass populate. And so this was a conflict that was created, but down the road, what ends up happening is you have this animosity, and Spain was literally creating a new level of animosity that, in America, our animosity was basically programmed by the king with slavery. He's the one that established, and if you read the original Declaration of Independence, I think I brought this up, he established slavery to be black only, that you could not have enslaved whites or anything else. They had to be black.
And this was from the King of England.
The King of England, correct. Yes. Yeah. So, and this goes back again to the 1660s, whoever the monarch was that inflicted that. And so what it did was it created a way of manipulation. So when we go through the Constitutional Convention, and deviate again on this topic, we were very well aware that the southern states, who had nothing but slave plantations, they were very rich in slavery, almost a high population of slaves, to a point where they were a risk and liability to the security of the Union. In other words, it wouldn't take much to basically tip the scale in favor of the slaves for them to uprise and take over those states. And so in the convention, they were saying, you guys are just a liability. Why? We got to get rid of that slavery. That's a liability we can't accept. And their argument was, well, look, we got all the money because we're making mass dollars. We will be able to fund your wars. And so it was one of those kind of conversations that would really make you kind of sick. How they were looking at things so baseless, or I should say, in such a way that there was less like, we're talking about people. Yeah. So anyway, the paradigm was that if we actually had these liabilities, that the North would have to go fight the wars. We created, right, wrong, or indifferent, we created a compromise that ended up actually being perverted down the road, because as I go through the constitutional ratification debates, the states of the North were clearly stating that the Constitution was going to end slavery in the United States. There were many in Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, New York. It was literally uttered by men in those debates saying that this may be a compromise for bad, but it will end slavery. And it was actually it was coming to that fruit in the early 1800s. How? Because they realized that Missouri was going to come into the Union as a free state. Now, we want to talk about Christmas, so let me just close this off.
Okay.
Slavery was America's #1 franchise. It made lots of money, and these families were just basically propagating it to their children, to their children's children, to their children, all the way across. And in Missouri had these big plantations, but they weren't the majority of the white people. So they saw that they were going to lose these slave plantations if they made slavery illegal. Mm-hmm. So they needed to get this compromise. So they used a lot of money and influence to create that Missouri Compromise. So back to Christmas, though. Christmas became realized as a way to start capitalizing. And so after these stories, after this Washington Irving started making these stories up, there were other things that, let's start marrying these other things. And these were all literally being concocted in helping create products. As a matter of fact, by the mid-1800s, there were periodicals that would help assist, the novice person who wanted to enjoy Christmas season, how they could do that. And this is where they started coming up with the ideas of Christmas trees, the decoration of the trees, the holly wreaths, these types of things, because they were literally marrying up these symbols of Christianity, such as the holly wreath with the red blood, of the berries being red, and the crown. And so that's how they started doing it. They literally, go ahead.
What were they marrying up? Because a lot of people have heard that these are pagan symbols, and they decided to use them. And a lot of, people believe that the Roman Catholic Church started trying to cover up the winter solstice and used decided to plant the birth of Christ there to overshadow like these winter solstice pagan activities. Mm-hmm. Now, I've never looked into it as a research project, so I don't know how far back that goes. So when you say they're marrying up things, is that what's happening or no?
Yes. So they started creating these children books, and they started creating, content, and these Sears and Roebuck or companies like that were trying to advertise the selling of artifacts to help you, make, the winter, what they called the winter solstice. Now they're calling Christmas. This is where we celebrate the birth of Christ. And so they started injecting these things. This really happened more in America than it did anywhere else. This is why when you actually go look at a list of all of the different Christmas Carol songs and their origins and the time of origin, it all really, the wave of Christmas music came in the mid to late 1800s and in America. They weren't happening in Europe. And again, we have the akin culture to where we actually use music as a form of religious celebration. So why was it that Europe wasn't doing this? Because they were okay with this pagan marriage. They were okay with living with, this view. I mean, look at Santa. Santa's just an anagram for Satan, right?
I'd never thought of it that way.
Yeah, it's an anagram for Satan. So as you start looking at all, as we lay everything out, where did this become commercialized? America started selling these ideas, these artifacts. As a matter of fact, what I have here, Sunday school classes encourage the celebration of this new Christian version of paganism. Women's magazines were important in suggesting ways to decorate for the holidays, as well as how to make these decorations. So this was the beginning of a new paradigm of how, teaching people what and how to celebrate. And so it took decades and decades. Children's books played an important role. Store catalogs began promoting items and ways of making things. And at this time, literature and progressive press had begun to congeal. By this point in time, in the mid-18 to late 1800s, the progressive press started congealing with the progressives or the communist movement and the manipulation of the United States. Because
so this the 1800s?
Yes.
Wow.
Mid to late because this is when the education system got taken over. When we nationalized with, what was the guy's name, Horace Mann, they went off and came back with a military academy type of education. All of these things kind of helped everything kind of move America slowly down this path. And you know what? America was feeling pretty good about itself because we were finding a way to recognize Christ. And all of a sudden, we had no real association. People really believed that Christmas time was celebrating the birth of Christ. I mean, even when I grew up in my parents' home, that was the celebration of the birth of Christ.
Yes.
And we tried to keep it more spiritual than, commercial. And so, one of the things I did when I had kids is we got a birthday cake and celebrated his birth in a very, modest way. But that's what we did. It wasn't until we really, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It wasn't until, people really started challenging the history of all of this, because these artifacts were hard to get into everybody's hands. The internet became integral in the awakening of our conscience. We were actually now able to see these historical documents and go, Christmas was declared by Ulysses S. Grant as a national holiday.
So, I mean, what were they doing in Europe? You mean they weren't singing carols as well, O Tannenbaum or anything?
No. So if you understand the religious significance of the 1800s,
Okay.
the churches were being dismantled in Europe.
Already.
The people were still feeling good about celebrating Christmas, but they didn't need their churches anymore. They didn't need these corrupt institutions. So they started their transition towards secularism, but they still maintained, these feel-good things about whatever they celebrated, the holidays. That's when people did go to church, right? Then all of a sudden, the attendance of church just started dropping dramatically once you get, enough people to become part-time members. Then all of a sudden, they just drop their membership because it's just too much of a bother.
Well, I know there's things that went into that as well. I mean, you have
Sure.
the Enlightenment period, the reason that the Enlightenment, where people started to drift away because
Yes.
of all of the religious wars that had happened in the 1600s. So just talking to the audience, things don't happen in a vacuum.
No, they don't.
Things build up, and you get philosophies that they're either secular or they are faith-based. And like Aristotle, and not that he wasn't a religious man, but he realized there's something bigger out there. Once you start losing that and you see humanity and what you can get out of this world, industry or whatever, money, power, you start walking away from that wonder and awe of a created being.
Right.
I mean, us as the created creatures, and there's a being out there who created everything we see.
Yeah, correct.
So, okay, that makes sense, because in 1859, when The Origin of Species was published, things started to unravel very quickly in the educational institutions. And so I can see things, people becoming disillusioned with their churches. And if you have priests not really educating people and coming up against what is being what's happening in the secular realm, and they just kind of get quiet like we are today, which hopefully we're going to get a little louder.
Yeah. So here's an interesting thing. So when we look at this grand conspiracy, there are certain aspects, there are certain spokes, there are certain actions, like this Christmas, evolution of Christmas, that people didn't even know that was going to be a part of the conspiracy of getting into and becoming second nature of celebrating Christmas and then making it secular down the road. People didn't know this. As a matter of fact, there are certain things that were, absolutely disclosed in documents down the road when we discovered what the Fabian Society was all about. They were very perverted. As a matter of fact, had we gotten our hands in the 1800s, when these men and their women or whatever, the society that came to America to create this communist movement, had we actually had their journals of this fact of pedophilia and all sorts of just disgusting debauchery, that these people had no bounds. They were that evil. There's no doubt in my mind. Had those things been disclosed at the time, they probably would have ended up being killed by mobs in America.
Yeah.
There was just, America was not ready for that evil yet. And so they kind of kept everything into a very secret, it was a secret society and a secret realm. And so, we can actually name names in some of these conspiracies, but there was no tie at all to this conspiracy of Christmas that was occurring in the early 1800s. In other words, the real author behind what we're really dealing with is Satan himself. He's the one that has brought down societies, and he has basically gotten energies to go for good purposes down these paths, and down the road, he uses them and perverts them for evil.
Yeah.
That's how, go ahead.
You said that Satan is an anagram. Isn't an anagram something you can read something forward and backward?
Or you can change the letters into a different name or word. An anagram is, you can make up how many different words out of that combination of Satan. Santa is one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't have to go forward. I mean, mom is a specific type of anagram. Dad, MOM, spelled forward and backwards, it's the same. That's a little bit different. An anagram is where you can make up different words out of those same letters.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Because I was thinking, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I understand that. I understand.
Okay. So let me go back to the winter wildings. I know that you have more to add to this, but did they start in Europe, in England, or the UK, whatever it is? Or did it start here?
So they started there.
Okay,
they actually, so Cromwell in the 1620s, or it was Cromwell, whatever the guy was that created the Puritanistic bent. He was trying to purge this movement that was taking over Britain, that was coming from these other European nations. And they recognized these as paganistic. They saw the associations of Christianity in these pagan rituals or these pagan, celebrations. And they said, hey, we don't want to be perverted. And the freedom of religion and that, I'll just say that desire of that, having the freedom of expression, that became the driving factor for the British to basically revolt against this control, this tyranny of controlling thought and behavior and so forth. So long story short, this was it started in Britain long before we even started coming here.
Okay.
It happened well before that. The purging happened about the same time we started coming here.
Okay. And he was this, just to be clear, he was purging, I guess, the religious institutions of the Puritanistic.
No. So Cromwell was trying to take Britain towards a Puritanistic Christianity.
Okay.
It was the Danes, the Danes were pretty secular,
Okay.
non-Christian.
Okay.
I mean, if you go to Amsterdam today, it is like Babylon, right? Amsterdam is just an evil, wicked city.
Dark.
So
Yeah.
that it was pretty much like it was back then.
Okay.
And that was based on, their philosophies, their lack of Christianity. Again, that song Jerusalem helps really cast this paradigm of how Britain started seeing itself as a critical role or a cog in the second coming of Christ.
Wow. I know that a lot of Americans believe in replacement theology. I didn't realize it went that far back.
Yeah,
Okay.
and actually, so Britain was captured, or I should say conquered, by Rome in 43 AD, 10 years after the death of Christ.
Right.
Right. So when we kind of look at Britain being under all of this rule, under the Catholic Empire and so forth, and then it became, this little island became the empire where the sun never set on. It was an empire of the world, but it wasn't an empire that was enslaving the world. It was an empire that was capitalizing. It was a monetary empire that was making money off of, evil things like opium and so forth in China. I mean, they did bad things, no doubt, but it wasn't enslaving the world like the Roman Empire or these other empires.
Okay.
They were basically trying to get everybody to the mercantile system, managing the productivity of the world and capitalizing on it. That's why it became so rich.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So we've got the winter wildings going on, and it came over here, and they continue to do it. There was economic disparity. I'm still not clear on why there was economic disparity, but if you don't want to, we don't have to get into the weeds there. What would your closing thoughts be, or
one of the things that
Christmas stuff?
One of the things that really speaks out is the fact that they created the New York City Police Department in 1828, because it was an indictment that it was just getting that out of hand, that there was that level of harm and property damage that was occurring. So it was getting that bad. And that's where, trying to deflate, trying to diffuse, and trying to, make it so that it wasn't bad anymore. And so they started injecting and trying to get people and promoting peaceful ideas, peaceful thoughts, and, and hey, Christmas. And that brought us all together. And in a way, it helped make America good. Okay. If you think about it, I mean, any time we can center our lives on Christ. Yeah. And, why can't we take one day out of the month and center our lives on Christ and make, a special holiday for, the Beatitudes, or, this, that, or all the different things that he's done. There's all sorts of things we could actually highlight and center ourselves and make that, but making it commercialized, and the giving of gifts, and how Christmas literally made businesses. That's why Black Friday is what it is. Black Friday is the day when businesses finally get into the black, because they've been not making any profit all year long until Black Friday, when everybody finally had time to spend lots of money. I knew people that would go in debt just for every Christmas. and then they would pay that debt off throughout the year, and then they'd go into debt again because they wanted to give their kids a great Christmas, and it had to be with money. It became commercial.
And that's too bad, because that's one of those things like, Christianity shouldn't care about monetary things. Of course, we have to live in this world, and God knows we need money, but to sacrifice so much just for trinkets is that is Satan's way of kind of driving us away from the main thing, because for some reason we just can't keep the main thing.
Yeah, there's a phrase for it. It's called serving mammon.
Yes, we can't do both. We can't serve God
correct.
and mammon.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I mean, if you really look again, I'm glad we could do this time with the technical difficulties and everything aside. I think that if the people listen to the Thanksgiving, dialogue and how spiritual that holiday was, in contrast to this concoction of, Christmas coming from these different efforts, and what corporations actually became the boon in making the money from this going worldwide. American corporations. Interesting. If you really start thinking about when the American corporations literally started becoming these global giants, it was late 1800s, early 1900s. Standard Oil, all of these types of things, just we took over the corporations, or I should say, the production and the selling of goods practically. And then after that, we became I'll just say, the mall of the world, because we bought everything from everybody. And by doing so, we bolstered up their economies because we became the consumer of all, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yep. And we see that today, which is fine, but there is, the encouragement of then if we're not producing anything, but that's a whole different story.
No, the writing's on the wall. The next financial crisis will be our last. The next financial crisis will be our last, because they've already presented our path forward, which would be getting away from the dollar. It'll be a digital currency. It'll be a world currency. And, however we feel religiously about it, the government doesn't care.
No,
and as a matter of fact, they've successfully basically weaned us, or enough Christians, out of the midst where we're a minority that, hey, that's an acceptable loss for them. The world everybody believes we have too many people. If you kill off the Christians, that's okay. That's not that many, but we have too many anyway. When you start looking at how evil and dark the society is, and how we all end up on the table, who's going to be the first off the table to say you're not needed? Because that's what they do.
Yes, that's what they do.
And
when we say they, can you clarify who they is?
Yeah, so these are the evil ideological powers, and basically, historically, they have been, in the last century or two, they've been communist powers, but they're the same kind of powers that Islam is. Islam and communism is the same thing. It's just that Islam has this, this concocted religion to it, where there is no religion concocted to communism.
Right.
But statism it replaces the family. It literally becomes the foundation of society, just like Islam.
Yeah.
They're both evilly designed.
It takes over control. Whereas the God, the Judeo-Christian God, the only real God, he gives freedom and liberty, and for us to make our own decisions. I mean, we can hang ourselves on our own decisions. It gives us enough rope to, either go to him or to completely walk away. And we know what happens there is we become the world, and, lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, and the pride of life takes over.
Well, fortunately, the Christians don't have a corner on the market of hanging themselves. We
Right.
don't have the patent, right? It's not our copyright. It seems like every species is more than, always proving itself of how
yeah.
quick it can go through its rope.
Yeah, exactly. And for anyone out there, I don't mean literal hanging. I mean,
I get it. I know.
eventually,
Right.
if you get disturbed enough, that does,
Yeah.
sadly. But what I mean is, you get so far from God. Even Paul says, you go on this downward spiral, reject God enough times that there's no coming back for some
Right.
people. There is
Right.
a point.
Right. Well, so let me just close on this because I know you're probably going to run out of time. If you look at, from the beginning when we met, I think earlier this year, maybe late last year, I don't know when it was, but it's been a little over a year, right? So
Yes.
as we started talking and having this dialogue, you can see that, I try to take an academic approach. I try to prove what is the truth. Where do we need to be? What is it we got? And so one of the things that is, that always comes out of everything is his hand. His hand gave us this nation.
Yeah.
His hand knew where we would be and what we were going to be facing. And he gave us everything we need to stop this. All the powers that be, doesn't matter what their powers they're wielding, his is greater. And I want people to think about this. The Constitution possesses that greater power because it would truly harness the power of the people to take back this government. And it's not done in DC where we're going to march with armed forces. It is done in your counties by holding people accountable to the Constitution. It is this beautiful thing that you can literally see. We don't have to go through a revolution. We don't have to pick up arms and use deadly force to get back what he gave us. We just need to use what he gave us.
Yeah. And that's where we need to understand. We have two sides that disagree with each other. One side does understand the Constitution. The other one is claiming that they understand, but they don't take the time to actually read it and dive deeply into a non-distorted version of it. And that's what I'm finding.
Yes.
There's both stating they know the Constitution. One side really does. Mm-hmm. They know the spirit of the law. They know how it was based. The other side does not. They reject God, but they still say they read things into the law that's not there.
Yeah,
so
and if I could dangerously walk out on thin ice, the conservatives, conservatives are those who don't understand the Constitution, and they're living under the shroud of things that make them feel good because it's about moral matters. In other words, when we look at whether we have, a moral education system or an immoral, it's the moral. They want a moral education system. Mm-hmm. Those who understand the Constitution says they should not have the education system at all. We should have our own control of it. And then it would be moral. It would be moral to what, the local needs and desires are, instead of allowing this national manipulation and indoctrination system.
Yeah, exactly. Like I teach my students, morals are what is. So if you are in a godless society, you're going to have godless morals in that society. So you will have an education system that is run that way. If you have, and then ethics is the way things ought to be. And so you're right. We shouldn't have this massive federal oversight, big brother running everything. It should be local. And, depending on what the people believe, that's the education that they are going to get.
Yeah. Let me give you this to think about going into the new year. there is not a communist that believes in this moral, immoral, blah, because there's not one person that practices what they preach. They believe that nobody should own property, that property should be shared and all of that. And these are the same people that have keys to their car and they lock their cars up. They have things in their homes and they lock their homes up. They're not leaving things open for you to come help yourself. No. Come on and just eat their food. It's okay. In other words, they believe in this concept of several property. This is my property. That is your property, which is antithetical to their core foundation. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Maybe we should talk about communism next time and Marxism. Whatever.
Right? It's just, when we really start thinking about it, these people take these stands, but they take stands in pure hypocrisy.
Yes.
Even Marx made a living off of the London exchange system. When I say the exchange, the stock market. He got money from a friend who to help him understand what he needed to do. And that's how Marx put food on a table, basically allowed him to write the Communist Manifesto.
Yeah. Engels. I think that was his partner. Okay. Yes. So we need to end here, but hopefully you'll be back in the new year. Can we go do another topic?
Absolutely. Okay. I know I'm gonna be busy, so let's look at when we can get reconnected. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Whatever you want to do. If I would just ask that we're going to have a flurry of content. If people are watching my show or not watching, but if you're listening to my show Monday through Friday,
where can they find that?
reclaimingtherepublic.org is where all my podcasts are. If you're not listening to it on Red State Talk Radio or streaming it via another mechanism like TuneIn, just go to Red State Talk Radio and you can listen to me on TuneIn or TalkStream Live, Apple. I'm sure there's lots of different mediums, but if you listen, then I'm going to walk you through the evolution of how America broke away and created, by the divine hand of providence, created a system that could withstand everything that the world of man can throw at it.
Oh, everybody out there, just start plugging into GR's information and be ready. Take pad and paper with you to listen to all this. So we know reclaimingamerica.org. Any other place?
It's right there on the thing. Reclaimingtherepublic.org.
Not America. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Reclaimingtherepublic.org. Thank you, GR.
Oh, thank you.
God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.